Hey, good afternoon, Market Rebels and Stu. There is the closing bell. I think I just heard. Amazon's due out here. Did they come out yet?
They did come out. They are looking,
Up or down? Where are they?
well, I don't know what the numbers are looking. I haven't seen the numbers, but the stock's looking down for sure.
At like how many points?
It looks like
Oh,
8 points.
wow. All right. Pretty good hit. Got a couple others coming out today.
Got Apple coming out. That should
Big
be
one
up.
on Microsoft and Google yesterday.
Yeah, Lilly
But that
down
kind of is a little bit of a
1%.
segue into what we're talking about today, because we hear this a lot in our Q&A classes. People have different ways of coming up with what's a good trade or what's an acceptable trade. They try to put everything into a box and have all these metrics. But one thing that we hear a lot that we need to make sure we get people out of this habit is this whole idea of risk reward ratios. And so the question we're going to ask today, do risk reward ratios identify the better trades? Right? A lot of people think that if I can pay one to make four, that somehow it's better than if I have to pay four to make one. And on the surface, it probably sounds okay until you understand the mechanics of the markets, because you're thinking, well, why would I want to pay a lot to make a little? It'd be much better to pay a little bit of money and possibly make a lot. But there's
Bill, I
a
have a question for you.
big missing piece in that. Sure,
Can you just tell me what the better trades are?
exactly. That's kind of where we're going with this. People like to find these little metrics that will say this is the answer, instead of being able to think through it and to say, is that even uh, a rational thing to think about, that the
I
risk
mean,
reward ratio is going to give you the answers. So
think
that's what
about
we're
it.
going to talk
All you
about
can do
here
is look in the
today.
back. All you can do is look in the rearview mirror and say, like, oh yeah, that one would have been better. This one would have been better. I mean, you could have put a couple things on your side to help you think that maybe you have some probability of winning, but the markets are pretty efficient, and they're going to price things the way they should be priced.
Right. That's what we're going to find out here, is why, even though it sounds good to some people to pay a little to make a lot, why there's a big missing piece to that puzzle.
Can
So
you tell me
today our
which
topic
options to
is,
buy? Can you tell me which options to buy that are undervalued?
yeah, right. That's the other thing too. And I think that's kind of what they're looking at here when they say if I can pay one to make four, it somehow is undervalued, that I've got the better end of the deal. And again, that's why so many people ask about the risk reward ratios, or they'll say, is it okay to pay three to make two for a $5 spread?
Yeah.
Or I only do spreads where I can pay one to make four. And when they make comments like that, in the absence of anything else, they're missing the point, big point. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. So it's our topic here, if you haven't guessed, the myth of risk reward ratios. So that's right, it is an absolute myth. It's just, as you'll find out, a reflection of risk, but it has nothing to do with whether it's a good trade or not. So let's kick things off with the risk reward ratio. So what this is it's usually expressed as the cost relative to the reward. So let's say you have the 100-105 vertical spread. It's trading for $1. What's the most you can make? Well, the spread can be worth $5. That's the difference in strikes, right? We have the right to pay 100, obligation to sell at 105. That's $5. Well, if you paid $1 for it, then the most that you can put into your pocket, the greatest profit, would be 4. So what traders would look at is they'll see this $5 spread, they'll look at the quote board, trading for $1, and they'll say, oh, this has a risk reward ratio of 1 to 4. And that's just saying, how much are you risking, in this case, $1, with how much can I make? The risk to the reward. And the first problem with that is, and we've talked about this before, I am definitely not in favor of calling the price you pay the risk. That's part of the problem here, the myth that people think, well, I'm not risking a lot, it's therefore low risk. But if that were true, how do you explain the T-bill market, where you might have to pay 95 to make 5? Right? So that's missing the point. Right? So again, traders believe that the bigger the ratio, 1 to 4, 1 to 10, something like that, that the better the trade. But this is the key point. The risk reward ratios tell you nothing That's right. Absolutely nothing about whether it's a good deal or not. For that, we need to look at the fair value.
It's actually worse. Yeah, it's like a psychological effect. You kind of think, you look at it, you say, "Oh, this is great," and
It gives you false confidence, right?
it points you down the wrong road.
Yep. Let me bet even more on it because this is a phenomenal risk reward
Yeah, let
ratio.
me bet even more because I can, buy my new boat.
I have no risk and I've got lots of reward. So the first thing to take, and if you get nothing else from this video, the risk reward ratio tells you absolutely zero about whether this is a good trade. For that, we need to turn to a completely different topic, is fair value. We're going to touch on it a little bit, but it's not really the primary focus. But it's more about showing why the risk reward ratio by itself is not the metric to use. So let's take a look at some of these. Here's the 100-105 vertical spread priced at $1. All right, now why would this thing be priced at $1? We can see it's bullish. It's relatively cheap, can make a lot of money. So where is the stock here, Stu?
Where's the stock? It looks like it's 105, maybe 102 and a half, 105.
Well, no, if we got to price this one for it priced at $1.
Oh, where's the spread?
Where's the stock? Stock's going to be down
Where's
here.
the stock is priced at $1, so the stock's probably 96, 97.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be below the 100 strike.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't hear that part. Sorry.
So people are going to say, well, there's not a very good chance. First of all, there's a low chance that we even get to the strike price of our long. And there's an even smaller chance that we're going to get to, let's see if we can get this pointer to work here. There's an even smaller chance that we can get to the maximum gain. So up into here. So the traders are saying, well, remember, the stock's probably down here somewhere.
Yeah, and how did I do that real quick, right? Once I figured out what Bill's question was. Look, it's $1. It's a $5 spread. It has to be an out of the money spread. Otherwise, it would be priced higher. That's Bill's whole point here, right? It has to be a somewhat fair value relative to where everything is. So it has to be an out of the money spread, which means it has a lower probability. The stock doesn't have any choice. It has to
be an out of the money
higher to bring up the value of the spread. And that's where the lower probability is relative to if it already were higher, right? Because it's got less to go.
So the thing is that traders recognize this and they'll say, you know what, this just doesn't look like it has a really good shot of making any money, but it's certainly not zero. So I'll give you 50 cents, 75 cents, maybe $1. We start getting into this bidding war. It's an auction. And in this example, we've stopped at $1. But it's because the stock is down here somewhere and it's relatively risky. See, now we're getting somewhere. If risk is high, price is low. People aren't willing to pay a lot for it. And because they're willing to pay a relatively small amount, the reward gets very big. So the thing to understand is that whenever you see a trade where you can pay a little bit and make a whole lot, there's only one reason for that. It's because it's relatively high risk.
There's also the flip side of that discussion as well, right? There's always if there's a buyer and there's a trade, there's going to be a seller, right? You always have to be a seller, right? So we're talking about the buyer, but how about if you flip it around and say, oh, you're the seller? I'm only getting one and I'm going to lose 4. Well, how come? Because it's a lower probability trade, right? You're actually betting that it doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah.
So you're not getting as much money.
That's right. So it's or in that case, you probably say it's a higher probability trade. So it's for the seller, it's just not worth that much.
Higher probability for the seller, lower probability for the buyer, right? Same thing, right?
Yeah. So think of it like with the T-bill market. If it matures, let's say, to $100 in a year, why do traders bid 95 to make 5?
Yeah,
See, if risk was defined by the amount you paid, that would be an insanely risky bet because you're paying a whole bunch to make a tiny bit. And you'll say, well, wait a minute, it's guaranteed. What gives here? Well, what gives is that price is not risk.
I know. I find that incredible. I hear that all the time.
That's why it's not a good habit to get into say, well, I'm risking 1 to make 4, because that by itself sounds awesome, but it's not accounting for the probabilities.
Yeah.
So what would happen now if we saw this, that same spread is now trading for 2? What happened here? Stock is probably now getting closer to 100.
Going up, right?
People are like,
It's
you know, it's not bad. Now, theoretically, if it were priced, if it were at 102.50, the halfway point, that spread would be about 250. Pay a dollar to make a dollar, or pay 250 to make 250.
and it will be somewhere around there.
Somewhere
Give or
around
take
there.
a few. Yeah.
Now, what about this? What if we see it priced at 3? Where's the stock now?
Well, how about a little higher?
Possibly even up here at 105.
Could be, depending on the
Maybe
time.
even
Yeah,
up into here.
involves.
So the thing is, if you're looking at this going, hey, wait a second, even if the stock sits still, I'm still going to make the full $5 on the spread. That's relatively speaking, that's not as risky. So now I'm willing to bid it up. I'm going to bid $1.50, $2, $2.50. We start getting into these bidding wars. And in this example, we've stopped at 3. So we're saying, all right, well, it's priced at 3. And now the maximum gain, we can see on that gray line, is 2. Why would you pay 3 to make 2? Because it's a higher probability. And yet, if you just say, well, yeah, it's a 3 to 2 risk reward ratio, people who live by that are going to immediately shoot that down and say it's a bad trade because I got to pay 3 to make 2. What about this one? Where's the stock now? Okay, we still got the bends at 100 and 105. Stock is up here somewhere. So not only can we have it sit still, we can also afford to have it run, slow, medium, or fast, that doesn't matter, but we can also afford to have it fall. So not only do we not need it to move, we actually have a little bit of an insurance policy where it can move against us, and we still make the full amount here, in this case, $1. Well, that sounds like a really good deal to me. Well, yes, and that means you have to pay for it. That's why the market has bid this up to 4 and left you with a $1 reward. So once you understand it in terms of probability, you'll say, that's kind of moving towards a T-bill, moving towards a much higher probability. But if you word it in terms of risk and reward, people say, oh, it's 4 to 1. That's horrible. Who would pay 4 to make 1? I've got so much risk, and yet I've got no reward. Let's just nix this one off the list. It's missing the point.
I'll pay 4 to make 1.
I do it all the time. Now, you do have to be a little careful with commissions, not so much these days, but you don't want to push it to 480 to make 20 cents, even though mathematically it might sound good. We do have to account for the commissions. But the point is, the main thing to take,
if there's an hour to go, you might.
Well, and that's true too. But the point that I'm trying to make from all of this is that the reason that these risk graphs are moving lower, right? The blue one gets bid higher, so the price gets pushed down over here. Orange gets bid even higher. We move to the gray, bid even higher. It's because the stock is now doing this. The stock cannot be in the same, well, assuming we keep volatility the same, but the stock can't be in the same spot. And that's what's changing the risk reward ratio. So whenever you hear traders saying, oh, I only take trades where let's say vertical spreads where I can pay 1 to make 4, what they're really saying is that they have a desire to take high risk trades, which is in a roundabout way saying you have a desire to probably lose money. And yet when you ask them about why they like the 1 to 4, it's because they think they have a higher probability of making money, and they don't. And then they blame the market makers, right?
When in reality, if you're really pushing that whole concept, you're really probably just a degenerate gambler, because you're betting for something that doesn't have
probably not going to happen.
Of happening.
Correct. Exactly.
It's like betting a 30 to 1 horse and think you're going to win.
Right. So that's what we're going to talk about here, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. That's really the way to understand it, is about the probability. So before we take our next step here and kind of prove this and to convince people of it, please remember marketrebellion.com/get started. Tremendous amount of free videos, articles, topics just like this to help you make better decisions. So Stu, one of the things, because I know no matter how many times we try to drill this into people's heads, people still come back to us saying, well, this has got a better risk reward ratio. They still want to fall into this risk reward ratio thing. And what we want to show here is, again, why that's not the thing to focus on. So one of the things I talked about in Vegas here recently, one of my favorite examples, let's
This is
take a
great. This is
let's
great.
take a look at roulette. Now we all know that casinos make a lot of money, right? The phenomenal buildings and hotels, if you've ever been into them, they are absolutely beyond amazing. But the question that I have for people, how is that possible for a casino to make money? And the reason I say that is that if we're going to focus on risk and reward, check this one out. 35 to 1. This is for roulette, which has got 38, at least most wheels have 38 spaces. And you can bet on various bets, just like you can in football. Who's going to be in the lead at the half? Who's going to be first one to score? There's all kinds of bets. Same thing here. You can bet on a single number coming up, and the casino will pay you 35 to 1.
Yep. Pay $1, put a
Bet
dollar
a
on a
dollar.
number and get back $35. Man, that is unbelievable. I mean,
Unbelievable. What a
sign me up.
phenomenal risk reward ratio.
Yeah. Sign me
So
up.
if we're going to focus on risk reward ratios, why are we goofing around with 1 to 4 for vertical spreads? We can get 30 or 1 to 35 in terms of risk reward when we can get that at a casino. And see, when you start wording it that way, now people start scratching their heads and go, I can't answer it. I don't know. Something's wrong, because this should be an amazing deal.
Now, let me take a quick moment here. So,
Mhm.
Bill and I, we want everyone to be aware of what it is that you're doing. We're not saying that betting 1 to make 4 is
Nope.
not okay. We're not saying that. We're
Totally
not
up to you.
saying
Correct.
putting a number on, betting 17 on the roulette wheel to make $35 on a dollar. We're not saying that's not a good idea either.
No, it's not
What
wrong.
we're saying is that you have to know what you're betting and what the probability is that you're winning,
Right.
or that you could win, or what, like, how you're going to win and how you're going to lose and why and what the payout is. Betting 1 to make betting 50 cents on some obscure option that maybe you saw on UOA or somebody whispered in your ear, or whatever, and watching it go to $15, was that a bad thing to do? Probability wise, it was horrible.
But they happen.
But it happens,
It
right?
happens.
It happens. It's not like, yeah, I should do it, or yeah, I shouldn't do it. It's, what do you have? What's the probability? When you bet when you bet $1 on the roulette wheel on one number, you have to go into it thinking, I'm going to lose.
Probably
I'm going to lose, right? Yeah, you have to have that mindset. You can't say,
Right.
oh my God, if I win, I'm going to lose, right? And if that's okay with you, then go for it.
Yeah. So we're not saying that it's wrong even to gamble or to bet on a single
No,
number.
not at
What
all.
we are saying is it's wrong to say this is a phenomenal deal
Right.
because I'm only risking 1 to make 35. Look at that. That's the mistake. And it's exactly the same mistake when you say, oh, this vertical spread is better because I'm risking 1 to make 4.
Mhm.
Now, the way I like to show this, let's talk about a guaranteed winning system.
Wait, hold on. So here's the question. Just show me how I can have 100% winners.
Right. I'll show you.
That's all I want to do.
Yeah,
I want to get my batting average like 80%. I want to win
Right.
8 out of 9 times, 9 out of 10 times. And and if you can show me how to win on every trade, then you are a veritable genius, and I'm in.
And
Tell
I'm
me
going to
what
show
you got.
you exactly how to do it. A lot of people out there like to predict and tell things. Are going to say, "Oh, I can get you into winning trades," or have a high probability of winning. Well, as you're going to find out, there's a very big difference between a high probability of winning and a high probability of profit. A very subtle distinction. But take a look at this. If you want to know, there is absolutely a guaranteed winning system at roulette. All right, so let's take a look at this. Here's the board. Assuming we have 38 spaces, we have a 0 and a double 0, although some of the US wheels now have a triple 0.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that.
39 spaces. But
And they're
at
just
any
as
rate,
crowded as the other ones, which is unbelievable
people just have no idea.
right now.
So at any rate, what you can do, now you can see there's some of the other bets down here on what are called the dozens bets, black and red. odd, even, all kinds of bets.
Yeah.
But if we're going to bet on a single number, all you have to do is take, let's say, a $1 chip and cover the board.
Mhm.
There you go. You are absolutely guaranteed to win. Congratulations.
Guaranteed to win.
So now the question is, how much money did you make? Well, at 1 to 35, I had to really make a killing. Well, hold on a second. Yes, you do win 35. That is true.
Yes, you did.
And even better than that, they return your dollar to you. You
Oh
don't
my
lose the
God, that's
dollar on the number that you
unbelievable.
bet.
I just made 30. I got $36 back.
Bright green, it's right there in front of you, bright
Hey,
green.
can't dispute it.
But hold on a second, Stu. How much did we have to pay to cover the board?
You had to pay more. How's that?
38. So we're actually, if we walked into the casino with 38 bucks, we walked out with 36, we're down 2. And that's 5.3%. And that is the house edge for roulette. The casino is taking a little over 5% of your money
Every time you throw the
every time. So, kind of a little analogy I like to tell people is that if you're standing there for, let's say, thousands of spins and you're betting a dollar and your friend is standing next to you flipping a nickel into the trash can, the two of you mathematically in the long run are doing exactly the same thing.
which in in the funny picture is like which you are, but you isn't you necessarily. You is like everybody, right? All the people in the casino are all flipping money into the trash can
On average, right? The
And that's
difference
where
is the
money
guy
comes
flipping
from.
the money in the trash can has a guaranteed loss, whereas some people will win.
Yeah, they
Some
will
people
for sure.
we've got a different standard deviation going here. But if you were to take this guaranteed system, and if you did that for 3,000 spins of the roulette wheel, there we go. Look at that, perfectly straight line. Losing $2 a shot, you're down $6,000 guaranteed. So you're going, well, wait a second. I had a phenomenal 1 to 35 risk reward ratio. How is that possible? So now you should be able to see it's got nothing to do with the results that you're going, unless you want to look at the negative, has nothing to do with it being a better trade.
So let's look at the funny part of this story. So what's the best? If you are going to do this, what's the very best chance you have of actually winning?
Ooh, yeah.
When you play at the table?
Barring any saying that I want to sit there all night because I find it fun.
Yeah, no
If you're
entertainment value.
trying to really maximize your chances, it's to bet it all on a single, or I bet it
time.
all and take a red black bet.
One time, because every time you bet, those chances are going down.
Yeah.
Right. So you just take it and bet it once and
Bet it all on red or black, you'll have a little under a 50% chance of doubling your money, which is not bad. It's just that it's extreme. You're either going to double or lose it all.
Like
So
that dude, I forget where he was from, but he did that, right? He
oh,
bet.
Ashley Ravel.
He sold everything and
Yeah, it was
put
like
together
130,000
grand
or
or something
something.
like that. Bet it all and he won.
And he won. Put it on red.
But he could have lost.
Yeah, yeah. Check it out on YouTube. Ashley Ravel Casino. It should come up. But at any rate, the point is that when you're out there making decisions for trading, you do not want to get in the habit of saying, I only look where I can pay 1 to make 4 or 1 to make 8 because those are better and they're low risk because I'm only risking a small amount of money. Absolutely the opposite.
Here's one more way to kind of say that, which gets lost with most people. It's not a 50-50 bet at that price.
Right. People exactly.
But people assume that it is. People assume that they're all 50-50.
Hey, if I can either make 35 or lose 35 or bet a dollar to make a dollar, but I've got the odds in my favor. Of course you've got the edge. Of course. But that's the whole point. It's just like a point spread in a football game. You don't, and that's why the crowd adjusts the price.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. Yeah, everybody thinks it's paying a dollar to make a dollar. So why can't I pay a dollar to maybe make 4? Well, it's because you're going to lose 4 if you're on the losing side. Okay, so anyway, that's why we have to understand really the better places to look. So quick little plug here again, marketrebellion.com/get started for more information just like this. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of fair value. It's a mathematical concept, and it's the price where the buyer and seller break even in the long run. And this is theoretically what you look at when you're looking at the Black-Scholes model. They're saying this is the price, barring any commissions, over and over and over. You would be expected to break even. Now, for a simple bet, it's the price you pay equals the reward times the probability of winning. And the fair value, you can think of it as a balancing point between risk and reward, like a seesaw. So it's really getting down to there's a price that we see in the market, but there's also a value. And the risk reward ratio is not showing you the value, it's just simply showing you the difference between the amount that you're paying versus the amount you can make. It has nothing to do with whether it's a good deal or not. So as Warren Buffett said, price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Yeah, everybody thinks like price and value are the same thing.
Same thing.
Absolutely not.
No, they're not. Not in the world of trading anyway. A lot of times we'll use those interchangeably in everyday language, but in the world of trading, the price that you pay doesn't necessarily mean it's a good value. And when you look at the risk reward ratio, all you're looking at is saying, well, it's the current price. Well, no kidding. Everybody can see that. And we can figure out the amount you can make. It's real easy to figure out the risk reward ratio. If that were how easy it was to find a good trades, also remember somebody's got to be on the other side. Who's going to sell it to you? Right? Now, let's take a look at Vegas, a little deeper dive here, and find out how it's possible that they can stay in business by offering such great risk reward ratios. So if we look at this first one right here, we have a 1 in 38 chance this is for the single number bet, of winning the $35 prize. If there's a 1 in 38 chance of winning, there's a 37 in 38 chance of losing the dollar that you bet. So we multiply these out, right? We take 1 divided by 38 times the $35 prize. We take 37 divided by 38 times the negative dollar. We add them together, we get, look at that, minus 0.053. That's telling you that on average, you're losing 5.3% of your money, or 5.3 cents per dollar.
So that 37 out of 38, right? If you have a 1 in 38 chance of winning, that the other side is you have a 37, 38 way to lose.
Yep.
That's actually 97.3%. 97% probability that you're going to lose.
Yeah. High probability.
Yet everybody's in there betting the numbers.
Yeah.
Man, it's crazy.
And that's why it's funny. They'll even give you now, a lot of the wheels will give you a tote board where they show you the last 50 spins and the red-black combinations and odd even, so people can sit there and study it. And they don't realize that the very best way is just cover the board. It's a long run losing proposition. That's why Vegas is giving you that information. They want you to sit and get lured in and study it. But now let's take a look at two numbers.
So Bill, if I said to you, like, here's this trade, and I did my mathematical hocus pocus, and I came to you and I said, yo man, here's this trade. You can put $200, you can put $2,000 into this trade. But you have a 97% chance of losing.
Mm-hmm.
Are you taking that trade? Are you thinking about taking that trade? Are you saying I wouldn't take that trade for $100? I mean,
it is funny that you mentioned that, because Kahneman and Tversky, the pioneers of behavioral finance, talk about that very thing. They call it framing. It depends on how you frame it in terms of gains or frame it in terms of losses. If you frame the question the way that you did, most people say, heck no, I'm not taking it. Mm-hmm. But if you frame it in terms of you can only risk $1 to make 35, then they say yes. Even though it's the same question. Right. It is funny. So let's take a look at the two number bet. You have two ways out of the 38 spaces to win. Now they knock your reward down to 17. Mm-hmm. Right? It has to do with probabilities. You're twice as likely to win with two numbers. So you've got 36 out of 38 ways of losing your dollar, and what do you suppose that comes up to? Look at that, 0.053. Now, it turns out that no matter what bet you take, who would have guessed? Vegas has it all figured out. Now, there is one exception to the rule. There's a bet called the basket bet or the 5-number bet. You're taking the 2 zeros at the top and the next 3 numbers, and it's called the 5-number bet. And it actually has an edge of about 8% against you. Only bet that does. And it's consequently called the sucker bet for that reason. So my advice for anybody playing roulette is avoid the 5-number bet and you'll lose your money equally fast. And that's really the best you can do. Now, can you win on it? Sure, of course. But that's just luck. You just beat the odds in the short run, but you won't do it in the long run. So once you understand this whole concept of fair value, it reminds me of there's kind of an old business school joke of you have let's say a little produce stand here, and the guy, there's some type of a store, and the guy decides to sell everything at a loss, but make up for it in volume. And you're going, well, something doesn't sound right about that. And that's exactly really in an indirect way of what you're doing when you're ignoring fair value. You're saying, well, I could do this trade because I'm only risking $1 each time. I could do lots and lots of trades. Fine, you're not going to make up for it. Cover the board. Take your pick. You're not going to make up for it in the long run. So how do we want to approach the trading? Well, at Vegas, if we were to do 2,000 spins at 35, getting paid 35 for every dollar, here's a simulation in Excel for 2,000 spins. Look at that, heading straight south. Now, this is one of many simulations. If we were to do it over and over, could some of them be up a little bit in here? Sure. Some of them will be even further down. But in the long run, they are all negative on this side of the graph with 100% certainty. Now, what would you kind of brought up an interesting point when you said on the single number bet, you said the 37 to 1, right? Remember that in the little calculation, you had a 1 in 38 chance of winning, 37 out of 38 of losing. That little 1 to 37 is a special number. What is that? That's our fair value. So if Vegas actually paid you 37 to 1 instead of 35, you would just go sideways over time. Now, you could certainly have moments where you're up or moments where you're down, but in the long run, you're just going sideways. But that's because they're paying off at 37 to 1. So what if they paid off above fair value? All right, so fair is 37 to 1. Unfair is anything less than 37. Anything above would actually be to your advantage. So what if Vegas paid off at 38 to 1? Look at that. Now you can even see here we ended up with some losses in the short run. But over here on the far right side, you are absolutely positively ending up with gains. And so we know that Vegas can't survive doing that. So the answer to the question is the reason that Vegas survives and that they have these big, beautiful hotels and why they can offer you these phenomenal risk-reward ratios for you, the bettor, to bet $1 and make 35 is it's phenomenal, but it's not phenomenal enough relative to the risk. It should be 37. And they're paid, so they're shortchanging you. Now, we could also flip it around. We could say the reward is too low. I could also say the price is too high. If you want to keep the $35 reward fixed, the price should be about 94 cents, not $1. So it doesn't really matter how you cut it. Vegas short changes you. And so I don't know how else to make it clear to traders. If you're focused on the risk-reward ratio, thinking that you're getting a good deal, it might be, it might not be. It's got nothing to do with it. And that's why a lot of traders just continue. And then when they lose, what do they do, Stu? Well, let me take even less risk. Let me find something where I can bet 30 cents and make 4.70 on this $5 spread. Because now I'm only risking 30 cents. You're heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah, in that example, Bill, what that trader is doing is now defining his risk with the dollar amount, which is not the way to go.
That's why dollars are not risk, right? That's why I do not like it when people say I'm risking 1 to make 4.
It's about the probability, right? Anyone who can, who's figured this out along the way, or makes a living doing bets and playing poker and that kind of thing, right? It's all about the probability.
That's right. And the risk reward ratio doesn't tell you the fair value. It tells you something about the risk. All right, if I can pay 1 to make 38, I can see that the probabilities are against me.
Way against it.
That actually might be a good deal. See how it looks like it's risky, but would I take that for if I were allowed to do it over and over? Absolutely, I would. I wouldn't take 35 to 1. See, that's the way you have to look at it. You can't say 1 to 4 is awesome. I don't know. Based on what probabilities? And traders just don't do that because they assume, like you said, that it's betting $1 to make $1, but now they're just paying me 4.
And here's another like kind of application about the trading. You might buy an option, say you buy an at the money option. And the stock actually we'll say a call. We'll do a call. People get messed up with puts. Well, so we'll just make it easy, call. And the stock goes your way, right? Stock goes up. And then you lean into another call for a sale, right? You kind of leg into a vertical. And that might be a good idea, right? That's
maybe
a hedge. It's not the hedge, it's a hedge. And a lot of people kind of do that. And in fact, I think there's traders in our firm that kind of like doing that. And I do that once in a while as well.
Sure, absolutely. Yep, I do too.
But the part that you gotta have to, the part that you have to remember is that there's money on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And you're giving that up in return for what you think it looks like.
Right.
You might wind up with a $10 spread that is, after you make your sale because the stock moved, you kind of bought at a $2 cost basis, and you're saying, "Oh man, this is like fantastic. How am I going to lose?" Well, you gave up the $4 or $5 or $6 that's sitting there that you could have.
For sure, that's right.
For sure, right? You just have to work that part into it.
Yep. So these are really good discussions why we find that so many traders lose, even though they think they're pretty obvious strategies. Right? Spread's easy. It just reduces your cost, limits your upside. That's all I need to know. No. There's a lot more going on. Now, the thing that I like to show here also to kind of put the icing on the cake here, Stu, some people, when I've presented this, will say, well, wait a second. There's something called a martingale strategy that guarantees you to win in the long run. So here's the way that a martingale works. Let's say you bet $1, and if you lose, you double the bet. Now you got to bet 2. If you lose that, you have to bet 4. So each time you bet, you double the size of the bet. And eventually, notice that's in quotes, you'll end up doubling your starting value. So in this example, I started the bet with $1, and you will end up having $2. You just got to sit there long enough. So here's the way that it works, at least in theory. We start with $1, and if we win, we've got $2, right? And so we end up, because we lost our $1 on the first time, we bet $1, we've got 2, we're up $1. But what if we lose that bet? What's the rule? We now have to bet 4. If we win that bet, what happens? Well, now we've got 4, but we bet 2 that we lost, and we bet $1 that we lost. We've lost 3. We now gain 4, so guess what? We're up $1. But if we lose that bet, now we have to bet 8. And if we win that, we'll be up $1. How? Because we have bet 8 and we bet 4. Plus 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. We've bet 7, we just pocketed 8, we're up $1. And that was our starting position. If we lose that bet, we bet 16. And if we win that, we're up $1. Why? Because we've bet 8 plus 4 is 12, 2 is 14, and 1 is 15. But we just put 16 in our pocket, so we're up $1, and that's exactly our starting point. So you can always double your money. It sounds like a good idea, and it does change the distributions of it. The problem is that you can go on very long streaks of losses. There was a case in Monte Carlo where it went 26 blacks in a row. I think it was in 1913. Very rare, but it does happen when you think about how many casinos are out there. But the point is, what if you thought, well, who wants to start with $1, right? We're going to start with $100. Well, by the time you keep doubling Think about it. $100, $200, $400, $800, $1,600, $32, $6,400. That's going to start getting expensive real quick.
Real fast.
So you
Yeah.
have to assume that you've got the bankroll to stay in it. So, oh, I do have I was right. There it is. I forgot I had the slide in here. August 18th, 1913, 26 times in a row. That is a 1 in 274 million chance it will happen. So now here's my rebuttal to this whole thing about the martingale. Now I'm not going to go into it in extreme detail, but let's say you start with $2,047. That would be required for you to go through 10 bets. So if you win on the first bet, your total bet is $1. You return $1. There's a 47.4% chance that you're going to win, right? Because the odds are slightly against you. But we have what? The expected bet is 47.4, and the expected return is also 47.4. If you lose that, in other words, we take one loss, now we have to bet 2. Our total bet is 3. Our total return, remember, we're going to end up with a starting point. But now that's about a 25% chance. We have to lose the first one and then multiply it by winning on the second. And so now the expected bet is 0.748. That's the probability times the bet. And the expected return is a return times that probability. Again, about 25%. Or I'm sorry, about 25 cents, let's call it. If you lose 2 times, so we just keep working all the way down. Now, we have to account for the 10th spin. You're either going to win the 10th, finally, or you're going to lose it. And if you lose it, now you're down $2,047. So anyway, this just continues. So if we look at the expected return, comes up to minus 0.063. We look at the expected bet, comes up to 1.2. So what is the long-term result of this? Well, we take the return divided by the bet. And what do you suppose is minus 0.063 divided by 1.2? Look at that. There's your 0.053. Dead on. The point is you cannot escape those odds. Once they are buried into a bad pricing system, you cannot escape them. If you win, it's from luck. It's not because you analyze the wheel or because of, Venus is aligned with Mars, anything else. It's just luck. And that is no way, unfortunately, to trade, but that's how many people end up trading when they say, let me just find the trades with a good risk-reward ratio. And so
what's the moral of that story? Just spin the wheel and have fun.
Spin the wheel and have fun, and realize that you are most likely going to lose in the long run. Not guaranteed, but most likely. But the longer you sit there, the more likely that becomes. So the big question for everybody out there, do risk-reward ratios identify the better trades? What do they tell you, everyone? Absolutely nothing. They tell you a little bit about the risk. But in terms of saying this is a better trade than this one, we have to turn to fair value. And that is, unfortunately, an entirely different discussion when it comes to options. But these are the types of things we like to talk about in our Q&As, or for people who want to take their trading to the next level, you can sign up with people like Stu and get one-on-one coaching, or join us at Market Rebellion for some live Q&A every Tuesday and Thursday. Exactly the types of things we talk about. And so with that, I want to thank all of you for being here. Hopefully you picked up some good pointers, and let's see what happens tomorrow in the markets, Stu. Hopefully we can round out the week with a nice little rally here. And we'll see everybody else on next Thursday for Coach's Corner, 4 p.m., and we'll see you then.
Fascinating stuff. See you.